you so much for joining us. Welcome, friends, to the Family Renewal Podcast. And we are so excited today to be welcoming Durenda Wilson, who is an author of two books. I have them right here. One is called The 4-Hour School Day, and one is called The Unhurried Homeschooler. And I love the little byline here, a simple, mercifully short book on homeschooling. You can see it's not that long. And as homeschool moms, we really need something short. Durenda has been homeschooling for nearly 30 years since she began and has 8 children. And so this is such a blessing to be able to sit down and spend some time together, really getting to connect hearts, but also gaining some wisdom from a veteran homeschooling mom. So welcome, Durenda. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. So I really want to just dig in a little bit and tell us about the age range of your children and just what led you into homeschooling.
Oh, okay. Well, we have, like you said, 8 kids, 5 boys and 3 girls, and the age range is 18 to 32. And we have our 10th grandbaby on the way.
Oh, wow.
And so I think that I can track all the way back to actually being in high school or close, maybe right after, where I happened to run across a book called Better Late Than Early by Raymond
Okay.
and Dorothy Moore.
Yes.
And they had homeschooled their 2 kids in the 70s, and they were both educators. And they had written the series of books, but specifically this one is the one that I happened to pick up. And it was just really an encouragement to just do things in a way that was just not so hurried. So as we approached the homeschool years, to take a more simple, sort of unhurried approach and slowly build from there, that seemed really to resonate with my heart for these kids that I hadn't even had yet. And so that I had that experience. And then I also happened to meet my first homeschooling family that I'd ever met. And I loved them. In fact, the mom is my Titus 2 mom to this day. She's someone I call for mentoring and things like that. So it was just a great experience. They were wonderful kids. They were bright. They were intelligent. They were funny. They were just they seemed so different in a really good way than, the average kids that I knew having gone to public school. So kind of between those two things, I
Yeah.
think that is what really kind of started moving me in that direction. And just wanting my kids to have a childhood, wanting
Yeah.
to spend time with them. I couldn't imagine sending my kids away for 8 hours
Right.
a day, 5 days a week.
Right.
So that's kind of how I landed there. And fortunately, when I met my husband, he was fully on board because his brother and wife happened to be homeschooling their kids as well, which
Ah,
was still pretty unusual. And this is
yeah.
back in the late 80s. And so, so just a lot of good, kind of little defining moments for me
Right.
as a young person, and then a single mom or single and then married and starting to have kids. So the Lord he knew how to kind of connect the dots for me.
Oh, and that's really neat that some of the Moore's books actually were instrumental because that was hugely instrumental in the way my family
Mm,
started homeschooling.
mm-hmm.
So this is kind of neat because I think it led into maybe a more relaxed approach for my homeschooling
Yes.
years as well. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a kind of a defining feature I see with even like the whole aspect of approaching what you label a 4-hour school day. It
Right.
can be scary because everybody wants to do right by their children.
Sure.
And academically, we really see that as a culture as hugely important. But you don't say, you don't go in any kind of tension between providing lesser academics in those 4 hours, but actually expanding those academic training that you're giving your children. Could you
Mhm.
describe some of how the 4 hours actually turns out? Like less is more in this case.
Right, right. And I think that when I talk about 4 hours, I always like to clarify that would not be for a kindergartner. That would be for a high
Right.
schooler. A kindergartner, you're talking 0 to 30 minutes, um, what they need is character formation, and that happens in living real life as a family. And of course we're reading to
Right.
them and some things like that, but we're not pushing the book work at that point.
Yes.
So, and then we're slowly incrementally adding as they're ready. So that's kind of that simple unhurried approach. But um i i didn't want I didn't think it was necessary for our kids to be in the books eight
Yes.
hours a day. And there are many reasons for that, which I go into in detail in the book. But
Yes.
I think the main thing is that we forget how much our kids learn from real life. And so I felt like it was important for our kids to, yes, they need some of the academics, but they need to have time for self-directed learning, for
Yes.
pursuing their interests and their hobbies. Because, kids, they need to be kids. And I just feel like I knew that my kids would not do well doing bookwork all day, and it's not something I was interested in doing with them all day. And I look at everyday life and I just think how much our kids learn when we're
Mm-hmm.
taking them to the grocery store and we're going to the library and
Mm-hmm.
we're just home together as a family. And I talk a lot about like nurturing sibling relationships. Those are your kids' first experience with close relationships, and we have the
Yes.
opportunity to use those to teach them what healthy relationships look like. So those
Right.
are some of the things that I talk about in the book, how important play is.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like um it's just, many parents think, oh, you would send your kid to school all day for 8 hours, so it must take all day. Well, if you talk to a teacher, I've talked to many teachers turned homeschooling moms, and I asked them very directly how much learning time actually happened in the classroom when you were teaching. And they said
Yes.
very, very little, a
Right.
fraction of the time. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And you can imagine so many interruptions. Um, just she's trying to teach 30 kids,
Yes.
and instead of, maybe we're at home, even with my 8, that would be a very good student to teacher ratio,
Yes.
so, the student teacher ratio is a really important factor when it comes to child success in education. This is something that's been proven through research. And so here we are, just being able to walk alongside of our kids
Mm-hmm.
throughout the day. And I always tell moms, I say, be mom first. Like, don't worry about being a teacher, be
Mm-hmm.
mom first, because when you approach your children with that nurturing nature that God has given you, the teaching comes automatically.
Mm-hmm.
We know when it's time to kick into that, okay, we need to show them how to do this, or we need to tell them,
Right.
or correct them or whatever. So I think parents get overly concerned about trying to pattern the public school system. My first comment on that would be, there's a reason you pulled them out of that system. So why would you want to
Yes.
go home
Yes.
and just do the same thing at home?
Yes.
So all that to say, it really does not have to take all day. Like I said, our kids are learning all the time. They don't just learn in special learning places. They learn
Right.
throughout the day, and they come to us wanting to learn. I think this is another
Mm-hmm.
thing we underestimate, what curiosity and desire to learn that
Mm-hmm.
God has put in our kids. It's supposed to make our job easier. And
Mm-hmm.
so it can make our job easier if we learn to sort of flow with it. And so it's kind of like, yes, there needs to be some things that, okay, we do need to learn some math. We need to learn how to read. We need to learn how to write. But how we approach that can be so much more natural and organic when we
Mm-hmm.
understand we're not having to force this. This is something that our kids at some point will want to do and see the need
Right.
for, some
Right.
earlier, some later. So
Right.
hopefully that answers your question.
Oh, totally. And
Yeah. Okay.
it helps just inspire and lay out like a whole idea of an education not just being academics. It's like a
Right.
whole package there
Yes.
of training the whole
Yes.
child. And I
Yes.
love that because it takes a lot of pressure off of the moms when we
Mm-hmm.
go, well, what do I do with those character issues when I'm trying to get through this lesson so I can check off we've done math
Mm-hmm.
today and I can
Mm-hmm.
check off we've done our grammar today,
Mm-hmm.
but I have resistance from my child. And so I see that taking that let's be mothers first really approach it just takes off a lot of pressure. And I can see that being just very life-giving for a lot of moms who are going, what do I do now? I would love to ask you one thing in an issue with that is seeing how children sometimes resist their lessons.
Mm-hmm.
What would you speak to that? Maybe my first question be, what could parents maybe take out of their lives to create a better love for learning,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
process of learning in their children?
Yeah, I think for me, I just have always felt like a simple, consistent routine at home
Okay.
is sort of foundational for our
Sure.
kids feeling safe, secure, knowing what to expect. When they are relaxed, they are
Mhm.
more likely to learn much easier without a bunch of pushing. Whenever a mom asks me, well, my son is, and it depends on what age they are, but overall, my answer is usually the same. My son is not, he's really not liking his math. I'm struggling with him
Yeah.
every day on this. My first question is, they think it's a character issue. He's being
Right.
lazy or whatever. And I'd always ask them, okay, so schoolwork aside, when you're working with him in other things like
Mhm.
chores and through it, that is he resistant to you? Does he respond the same way?
Good
Because if
question.
he does, then you want to start with the character issue, because that is clearly part or maybe all of the problem. We don't know, but you would want
Yes.
to address that first.
Yes.
So you're going to want to.
Oh no. You got uh,
Okay,
oh,
am I back?
I
Okay.
think so. I
I
didn't
think I
hear anything. I just noticed it
froze.
froze.
Yeah,
Good.
I think it froze for a minute. But then sometimes the mom answers no, he's really responsive to me, he's respectful, he
Yeah.
doesn't seem to show laziness in these other areas. And I say, okay,
Right.
then what may be happening is there's something with the way that you're approaching math that isn't working for him.
Good.
Okay,
Yeah.
so how much time are you spending too much time? Are you pushing past the point where he's done every day? Is he getting breaks between subjects? Things like, I will even sit down with the child. You can ask yourself those other things that I just mentioned, but my favorite thing to do is just sit down with the child when they're
Yeah.
not upset, when
Right.
they're calmed down, and just say, let's talk about your math. I see you struggling, and I really want you to know that I'm on your side. I want to help figure
Mm,
this out. So let's
love
do this
that.
together.
Yes.
Can you tell me what it is you really don't like about this math? And so keep asking questions till you get some clarification on what it
Right.
is they don't like. And then what do you like about, is there anything you do like about it? So
Smart. Yes.
then now you have a really good gauge on what's working for them, what's not working for them. And you could maybe possibly just adjust the curriculum you already have and
Mhm.
do it in a way that works for that child, based on the information you've gotten from them, and try that for a while. Sometimes we do need to switch and get a new curriculum, and that's understandable, but I think we're really quick to do that. And I
Yes.
don't think it's always necessary. Like, we can say, how can we make this work? So now you're sitting down with your child, you're saying, I value your input. I care about whether this is working for you or not. I want to problem solve with you. So there's a
Mhm.
whole bunch of things going on there that's about more than just the math. It's
Right.
building relationship with your child.
Mhm.
It's giving them the opportunity to share what's maybe stressing them out, so that they learn to put words to their frustration. These are important things for our kids to be able to do.
Very.
So what presented itself initially as a major obstacle turns into an opportunity. And this is something that no teacher in a classroom has time to do. They just don't
Yeah.
have time for that.
Yes.
But as moms and as parents, we have the opportunity to do that. We need to make the time for that. And this is something that, when I talk about the 4-hour school day, it may sound like, oh my gosh, we're rushing through to get it done in 4 hours, but that's not the case. We're understanding that learning happens all the time. We're keeping a certain amount of things just simple and straightforward.
Mhm.
Life is complicated. Kids get overwhelmed. We get overwhelmed. And I think it's so important that we are choosing approaches and curriculum that actually breathe life into
Mm,
our family. Don't
that's
suck the
good.
life out of it. And that's a
Right.
constant, really having to reevaluate. It's not
Yeah.
like you're going to find a perfect plan and it's going to work forever. It doesn't work that way. You're going to
Yes.
do that. You're going to find one that works. I like to say, if it's 80% enjoyable and 20% work, that's a really good ratio. Now, if you're dipping
Nice.
down into where it's 50-50, it might be time to step back. Sometimes it
Okay.
just means we need to take a break. Maybe we
Right.
just need to do something different, in terms of, like, lay the schoolwork down for a few days and just do something different. Our kids need a break sometimes. Sometimes we need a break, and that is okay. But the whole, if you want me to, I'll just share really quickly what our day did look like. If
That would be wonderful. I know
just
sometimes just having an idea of what happens in other people's homes
Right.
can be like, "Oh, I never thought of that." And
Yeah,
that's
and
something that I can make it work.
exactly. And my routine came out of a lot of prayer and a lot of just
Yeah.
looking at what was working for our family. So you can pick and choose pieces of it, or maybe try the whole thing, whatever you want to do. But I'm just offering it sort of like a
Yes, that'd
something
be
in a
wonderful.
buffet.
There you go.
So when we got up in the morning, the first thing that the kids did was make their bed, get dressed, and tidy their rooms.
Okay.
Okay. Once they were done with that, they could come out, and typically it was breakfast, and then of course that involves some, them
Clean up,
helping
right?
with whatever, and then chores afterwards. So that's, breakfast cleanup, maybe the garbage is getting taken out, maybe kids are gathering laundry and sorting laundry, and there's so daily things that just have to happen
Yeah.
every day. Okay,
Yeah.
we're all pitching in, we're doing this as a family, as a team. And I did have pretty much everything assigned to each person because that just worked well for our family. Everyone just needed to know what they were doing
Right.
and the time frame that it needed to get done in. So chores, breakfast, a few more chores, and then I built margin into that time
Mhm.
for inspections, because I always
Mm.
said you can't expect what you're not willing to inspect, right? Because our kids
Mhm.
are not going to do a good job
Mm.
if we're not checking on them. That's just human nature, right? Plus,
So,
that gives us the opportunity to teach them what a good job looks like. So, I'll give you a
yes.
quick example. You go to their room, they think their room is picked up, and it's clearly not. There's things in the corner. Instead of telling them, oh, you need to get those things in the corner, I'll say something. I'll start with some praise. Okay, your bed looks great. The middle of the floor looks great. Do you see anything else that's out of
Yeah.
place?
Bring
And you're
observation, right?
right. So you're teaching them, training their eyes to see what does a clean room look like. And then when you're done, you step back and have them look at it. This looks great. You did a wonderful job. Look how everything is clear. Point it out again. So we want praise, we want some correction, and then more praise.
Yeah.
So, but you have to build margin into your day to be able to do that,
Mm. Right.
And so then we would go to our schoolwork, and kindergarten through 8th grade really tried to just be done by noon. So,
Okay.
of course, the younger ones, you're gonna cut them loose a lot sooner. It's kind of like riding a bus. They're gonna get off a lot sooner than the other ones, but you're gonna slowly make your way through them. And I try to keep my kids as independent as possible, because
Okay.
it's really what I needed. There is
Yeah.
that child periodically. I totally get that for a season or maybe even long term needs more of you. That's
Mhm.
okay. That's God has weaved your family together a specific way. He has a way for this to work. I would often have the older kids helping, maybe do a 20-minute reading lesson with the younger kid, just
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
trading off. So I was implementing a little bit of help from the older kids without taking too much away from their schoolwork time.
Sure.
But that
Sure.
was a valuable lesson for them too, to sit with their
Right.
younger siblings or care for a 2-year-old for 20 minutes while I worked with this one over here. And it was never perfect. Okay. I know that a lot of moms will be listening and thinking, oh, that sounds so organized. And no, there was not one single perfect homeschooling day, right? It's just was a plan that I just tried to implement and do the best I could with. And
Right.
it seemed
Right.
to work, overall, it seemed to work. So let's see. Oh, the other thing I did was I learned that it was really important for me to check the kids' schoolwork every single day. So before I cut them loose, they had to come to me,
Okay.
and that
Yes.
way I made sure they were actually finished, and they'd
Right.
sit next to me one at a time. And I would say, okay, so this sentence, this looks really good. Do you see a word that might be spelled wrong? So
Ah,
trying to get them to do more of the correction and me less of
right.
the correction, so they learn to see it themselves. And sometimes they had to go back and redo things, but they knew they weren't going to be cut loose for that just beloved free time that they would have in the afternoon if they didn't complete what they were doing. So I made it
Right.
reasonable, not impossible for them to do it.
Yeah.
And so then when they were all finished that, it was lunchtime. We had rest time every single day. We all
Okay.
just needed to be separate from each other
Yeah. A
for
little
about at
quiet
least
time.
an hour, where they have their stack of books. You can read, you can rest, no toys. Well, sometimes I would let the little ones have a little bit of toys, but for the
Okay.
most part, it was
Yeah.
like stack of books. You can read, you can look at the pictures, or you can rest, but you have to be quiet and stay put. And that involved a lot of training, a lot of,
Yeah.
time in the
Yeah.
hallway, listening to see if they were obeying or not. Um, and then and then they would get up, and that was the golden time for them. For a couple of hours, they had to follow their interests and hobbies. And now when they were younger, first starting out, they would say, I don't know what to do. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, well, you have to figure it out. And usually I sent them outside because I wanted them to be outside for a while.
Right.
Sometimes they were persistent with the I'm bored thing. And so I would have a jar, and it would have little pieces of paper in it. And it would
Yeah.
have things like, about half were chores and the other half were
Okay.
fun things to do. So
So it's
they
a little
really,
mix.
yeah. So they took a chance. They didn't know whatever they got. So most of them weren't willing to take the chance, and they would go outside and they would figure it out. Sometimes I would throw suggestions out there. What about this? What about this? Usually they didn't like my ideas. And I'm like, okay, well, I gave you some ideas. So you're going
Right.
to have to, make them do it themselves. And so eventually that turned into this time that they absolutely loved having every single day. Now, when we made doctor's appointments and things like the dental appointments, those happened during that time. But,
Sure.
so because some moms ask, well, when did you do those things? Yeah. I said,
Yeah.
well, it would be during that time.
Sure.
But 90% of the time we were home and they got that time and they loved it. And so it motivated them in the mornings to get
Yeah.
through the stuff so that they could have that time in the
Have that
afternoon.
time.
And then it was a few more chores. You know what it's
Yes.
like. It takes a lot to keep a family and a household running with a lot of
Yes.
people. So there's always a lot
Yes.
that needs to get done. And then it was like showers and then dinner and then family time after that. So that's what our day looked like. So it involves a lot of
Right.
chores.
Mhm. Right. Just
Uh,
does in life though.
yeah, yeah, but our kids have a really strong work ethic, and I
Right.
think that was part of the reason is that was just a very consistent, real, normal
Yes.
part of our lives. It
Yes.
wasn't optional. It wasn't, oh, every now and then, or it wasn't inconsistent.
Hmm.
And so I feel like if we can't be consistent in those areas, especially with chores and some of that directed learning, and giving them some
Yeah.
time in the afternoon, that maybe we need to dial back our activities, our outside activities, things
Right.
like that, because it's just that important.
Well, and I love like how it almost goes back to what you were saying of having a routine helps the child not have so much resistance to those good things that we want to give them, academics and
Yes.
training them and having a good work ethic and character
Hmm.
training. And I really see that so beneficial because if
Hmm.
it's just this is what I wake up and do every day and it's not hit and miss, that can make such a
Right.
difference
Right,
for the
right. And
child.
and you can have fun little times throughout the day. Like
Sure.
mid-morning, for a long time, we had a tea time. So
Oh,
they
fun.
had done their schoolwork for about an hour and a half. And by then, of course, the little ones were all done. They'd checked out a long time ago. But we would all gather at the table. And I told them, I said, and I would fix it all so it was ready when they sat down. I said,
Uh-huh.
15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. And
Yeah.
then we go back to our schoolwork. If there's any resistance, we won't do this anymore.
Okay.
And they loved that time. And so they were super cooperative. And, so you have these little points throughout the day that they have to look forward to. So mid morning was
Right.
one. And then, of course, their afternoon free time was one. And they enjoyed, of course, after dinner family time.
Nice.
So yeah,
Yes.
just kind of having these points throughout the day. And it was also
Right.
great for just connecting with them.
Right.
When you're just in the middle of kind of you're giving sometimes a lot of instruction and that kind of thing in the morning time, it's nice to just sit down and chat about
Yes.
whatever they want to chat about. It kind
And
of
they have
keeps
so
that.
much bottled up, right?
They do. And it just kind of ties those strings of fellowship with them. And then you can continue on with the rest of the morning.
Right, right. And it's amazing. I love how you're talking about that, like that time to connect with their hearts, or even like we were talking about the math, just being able to say, why is this something that you're that's challenging for you? What do you
Hmm.
not like about it? What do you like about it? And that
Hmm.
way we're kind of delving into having that more communication with our child and not just saying, get with the program, little one.
Right,
It's
right, right,
it's kind of delving into how can I help you? And I think our
right.
children really go a long ways when they see us caring about their hearts and caring about their feelings in that. Not that they
Absolutely.
have choice because, like you said, there's
Right,
certain things you just got to do in life,
right.
and we're leading in that, but leading them gently. That's really sweet.
Yeah, I think it's good for the relationship. It's also good for us to learn how they learn and for them to learn
Yes,
how they learn. Because what I
right.
learned over time with my kids is some of them needed something else going on in order to be able to focus. Now, I'm not wired that way at all. Give me
Yeah,
quiet. That's what
yeah.
I want. I want quiet when I'm studying. Well, some of
Right.
them wanted music in their ears and
Okay.
some, wanted to read upside down on the couch. Okay, that's totally great, but just being aware that there are other ways that
Mhm.
people learn besides the way that we learn and it's so valuable for our kids to know that because what happens
Yes.
is then as they get older they implement that themselves. They understand, okay, I'm
Right.
approaching this. Maybe they're taking a college class, maybe they're apprenticing, maybe they're, going to trade school or they're wanting to learn something new. They're going to approach it in a way that they
Yeah.
know works for them and they'll learn it much quicker. And
Right.
and that will just really feed that love for learning that we want to last a lifetime.
Yes. And that's kind of one of my questions, like, is going into the high school years when we start going, maybe, oh, we've got a lot more to prepare, some
Mhm,
transcripts, scripts perhaps. How do you how do you navigate that? How did you navigate that? How do you recommend moms navigate that when
mhm.
maybe the moms in particular are feeling a lot more pressure to
Right,
add in more like 8 or 10 hours of strict
right.
book work? How does that work for what you'd recommend?
Well, I think that we forget again that real life translates into education pretty easily, actually. We had
Yes.
kids who started jobs at 16. And
Okay.
so we went through and they told me every single thing that they did at work. And the trick is being able to translate that into, I call it education ease. Like, it goes from real life to, hey, that would fit in this slot, that would fit in this slot. So a lot of these real life experiences actually count as credits. If
Yes.
nothing else, they can be an elective.
Mhm.
So as our kids are having different experiences as high schoolers, or they're continuing the things that they love from the time they were little, like our daughter loved having animals, goats and sheep
Ah,
and all of that. And it was something she enjoyed. So we just took that. She spent hours on it every day, and that counted towards animal science. I have actually a couple of podcast episodes called Life Counts uh, as credit.
oh, wow, that's a
And
good one.
so it's 2 episodes, and I think it's like 397, not 397. I can't remember what numbers they are. But if you go on my podcast page on my website, there's a search bar. And you
Okay,
just put
great.
in life counts as credit, and those will come up. And any high
Nice.
school ones will come up, because I am really all about what I would call sort of alternative thinking when it comes to high school. Like, I'm
Sure.
unconventional. I think that college can be useful. I think that most of the time it's not,
Yes.
for many
Yeah,
different reasons.
right.
But back to the high schoolers, remembering that life counts as credits. The other thing is streamlining your subjects. For instance,
Yes.
you don't need to have a separate writing lesson if your child is writing a summary on the history that they read that day.
Gotcha,
So
yes.
you merge those together, and all of a sudden you've got
Right,
two subjects taken care of in one fell swoop. So I
right.
think that's a big thing. We have to be a little bit creative. The other thing, we want our kids to own what they're doing. And so my way
Okay.
of doing that was to prepare them before they got to high school. Okay, so when you get to high school, you are going to earn that diploma, not me. So, how this is going to work is you're going to be responsible to do the work. I'm not going to hold your hand. I'm not going to be over your shoulder. I'm not going to nag you to do these things. You have got to do it. I will sit down with you. I will be a resource. We'll sit down and figure out, here's your trajectory, your 4-year trajectory. These are the credits that you need to earn.
Yeah,
Here are some different ways we can do that. Do you have other ideas about how you could earn those credits?
right.
Here are some resources for math, 3 different, because I'll know that child by then, what works best for them. Here are 3 different options. You can take a class, you can go online. Here are 3 different curriculums you could do at home. Which one would you like to do? You don't have to answer me now. You can think about it.
Sure.
So that really, that longer conversation with that
Yeah.
older child and giving them the choice as to how do they want to earn these credits. My kids really stepped up to the plate. It might have taken them, some of them, their freshman year to really get their land legs. And I was right there with them, but I really tried not to do everything for them. I tried to
That's
ask a
smart.
lot of questions and let them do
Mhm.
it. I said, when you walk across that aisle and you get that diploma, I want you to be proud of yourself that
Mm.
you did this. It wasn't
Mhm.
mommy doing it for you. You did it. It's kind of like that. It should be a defining moment for them. And I
Yes.
think as homeschoolers, that at least for us was a good way to make that a defining moment for them.
Wow, that's beautiful. And it shows what, like, just what pressure, not pressure, but work they put in themselves to make that
Yes.
happen. That's
Yes.
what's going to prepare them for life the best. You always hear
Mhm.
about colleges saying to their homeschooled students, how much they knew how to study for themselves and weren't
Mhm.
doing that hand-holding process. So it's
Yes.
really exciting to see that work
Mhm.
through the high school years.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it just makes me think how important all of that comes as a package, as you said, just being a whole person, of being able
Mhm.
to have the family dynamics being part of their education, because we see that as something that will launch them later. And
Right.
from what I'm understanding, there was no problem for your children going through that homeschooling process, maybe even that relaxed high
Hmm.
school years
Hmm.
to employment and further education.
Yes, absolutely. And, we talked about that margin in the afternoon. They didn't lose that as high schoolers. They
Yes,
used that time for hobbies, interests, but also job shadowing.
right,
This was,
right,
and our kids can just engage or had a job or whatever, maybe they worked in the mornings and they did their schoolwork in the afternoon. But
sure.
at that point, that was up to them as
Yeah,
long as they could navigate completing everything and keeping up with everything.
that's
But the
wonderful.
job shadowing, this was a really huge thing for us. I remember our son he said he wanted to be a physical therapist. He had just gone through this
Nice.
anatomy book twice. I mean, he was really serious about it. And he was in high school. And I said, it seems to have been an interest of yours for a while. So let's try this. I called a local physical therapy office and I said, hey, I have a high schooler. He'd like to become a physical therapist, but he'd really like to experience what it's like. They were great.
Right.
And this is the thing, moms, we
Yeah.
can do this for our kids. I mean, I could have made him call, but I felt like being the support for resources that it was good for me to encourage him by making that call. And the
Mhm.
worst thing that the office is going to say is no, right?
Right.
And so
That's
pick
true.
up the phone, call him, ask, is this even a possibility?
Yes.
And they were like, yeah, we'd love to have him. So he did that
Right.
for a couple of weeks. And I was
Mhm.
kind of excited for him because he wanted to be a pediatric physical therapist and he was really good with kids. And I could totally see him doing this. So after it was all over, I said, so what do you think? He said, I don't want to do that.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, can you tell me why? And he said, yeah, mom, I had no idea that 80% of the job is paperwork because of
Oh,
inputting things into the computer because of insurance and all that. He said,
yes.
I'm not interested in that. Now, imagine if we'd never had that experience. He
Yes.
finished high school. He went on for 6 or 7 years of college, racked
Mhm.
up all that debt, and then started a
Mhm.
job that he hated. Right.
Right.
So this
Right.
is the beauty of homeschooling is we can give our kids these experiences to
Mhm.
help really kind of hone in on what they
Right.
actually really want. It means there's going to be
Right.
a lot of things that are a no before something is a
Yes.
yes. But
And I
we're
think that's
willing.
where we have to be brave enough
Yes.
to ride it out
Yes.
with them.
Yes, yes, it is, and that's exactly what we do. We walk right alongside of them, letting them
Yes.
own as much of it as possible, but just and I think this is such a beautiful time because it really establishes more of an adult relationship with our
Mhm.
kids. And then
Mhm.
as they go into adulthood, they actually still want to be with us. Like they want to hang out with us. And it's not always easy. It can be
Yeah.
really challenging because when to know when to let go, when to say something, when to keep my mouth shut, when to let them make the decision. You feel like you're sort of walking through a maze blindfolded sometimes. But Jesus is there walking alongside of us and, giving us wisdom and showing us what to do. And it's okay if we make a mistake. We can always say, I'm sorry, I messed that one up. Do you forgive me? Let's try this again.
Oh, that's great. Yes. Well, I had one more question too.
Sure.
This is just something I saw in the books and I wanted to ask. I just felt like you had a really good answer. There's a fear for a lot of homeschool moms of what am I going to do if I have created gaps in my children's education? How can
Mm-hmm.
I avoid having gaps in my children's
Right.
education?
Right.
So, what would you say to those parents who are having that fear?
Well, I think, first of all, your child is going to have gaps. That
Yeah.
is just a fact. No child can know everything about everything or be prepared. We can't prepare our kids fully for everything. That's impossible. I mean, that's a job only God could do,
Yeah.
And so what we need to recognize is that if we give our kids the basics, they have the foundation is down, the character, the basic math, addition,
Yeah.
subtraction, multiplication, division, percentages, and decimals. If they have all of those, they can always move on to higher math.
Right. Right.
Um, we want them to have a love of learning because and be motivated and have a work ethic because then when they see something that they want to do, they have the chutzpah, I guess, for lack of a better term, to do it.
Yes.
If they know how to just communicate clearly, uh, just something like like you and I speaking, I can communicate clearly to you in a way that you can understand. If they can do that
Right.
in typing or writing or whatever,
Yes.
that's the most important thing. So it's
Yes.
not important that they've written, 105 paragraph essays. My kids, their main writing was writing a summary of what they read, because there was so much that happens when you have to recall what you've read and then put it into words. And then there's
Yes.
punctuation, spelling, grammar, all of that. And I went over that every day. And so I remember, and I'll tell you a really funny story. Our son wanted to start college at 16 and he hated writing, absolutely hated it. And so from the time he was, from the time he said, I think I want to be a software engineer, which is about 12 years old. He's the only one of our kids who knew what he wanted to do with that early. That's not typical or common. So I don't want to make anybody think that's something every kid should do. I don't
Awesome.
even think they should know by the time they're 18. I think it's crazy to expect that. But he was struggling and with the language arts. But I felt like if I pushed him to do all these research papers, and he was going to hate it even more. But he
Mhm.
was passionate about math, like passionate. So he spent probably 80% of his time on math, just
Wow.
wanting to get back, because he knew he had to be really good at math in order to be a software engineer. So
Right.
fast forward, we limped along, and
Mm.
16, he decides to enroll in dual enrollment in college to start
Okay.
college. He wanted to start early. I said, okay. So he goes and he takes the English entrance exam and the math. And I am in the car and I am sweating bullets because I'm thinking, this is it. I'm going to find out what a horrible homeschooling mom I am, because I did not make him write a bunch of 5 paragraph essays and all this was going through my head. He comes back and I said, so how did it go? He said, great. And I said, well, how did the English entrance exam go? He said, oh, I aced it. And I had this shocked look on my face. And I said, I tried not to look too shocked, but I was
Yeah.
like, really? So how did that happen? And he said, Mom, you taught us how to speak well at home and you made us write summaries. He said, that's really all I needed to pass the entrance exam.
Well,
And then he fast forwarded to his first class, which is a really, really difficult English class. He got a B plus on his first paper. Footnotes.
okay.
I never taught him any of that. When he was
Observation.
motivated to
Right.
do, he had a goal.
Yeah.
When he had a goal, he was willing, he could fill in those gaps. And I remember talking to one of our sons. I said, what do you speak to this? This is a different son, Luke. And he said, Mom, the important thing was you gave us all the basics. We were solid
Yeah.
in all of that. It's our job to take that and do something with it. And
Mm.
I was like, thank you for saying that. He just sort of made this little distinction that I think that is difficult for us to make as parents. There's a
Mhm.
point at which it becomes our kids' responsibility
Mhm.
and not ours. And so it's
Right.
hard to know exactly where that is, but just know that if your child has the basics and they have a love of learning and they're motivated
Yeah.
and they have a work ethic, they're going to be able to do anything that they want to do.
Right.
So you
Right.
don't have to worry about that. I think we sometimes underestimate what our children are capable of. And so
It's true.
and this is where we as parents can also play a really important role of encouragement. Just like, you're doing such a good job. I'll give you a quick example. Our son was downstairs. He's been doing some remodeling downstairs, and he came upstairs and he said to us, he opens the door and he never calls me mother, but he says, Mother. And I'm like, what? I'm playing along. He goes, come and marvel at my work. And I said, okay, I will do that. And so I went downstairs and I just oohed and awed at everything he did. And I realized as I'm walking through this, like, this is our main job as parents and homeschooling parents, is just to marvel at what our kids are doing, what they're already doing, not what they haven't
Yeah.
accomplished, not be focused on what they're not doing yet, but let's look at what they are doing, what they are doing on their own, the things
Mhm.
they're accomplishing in the directed learning time, the progress every day. If they're making a little bit of progress, that
Mhm.
matters,
It all adds up.
celebrate that. So I think marveling at their work is so important. About a few days later, our other son was down there. He's a plumber and he was doing all the plumbing down there. And he comes upstairs and he starts to try to explain to me what he was doing down there. And of course, I can't envision it. So I just looked at him and I said, Sam, would you like me to come and marvel at your work? And he said, yes, actually, I would.
Oh, it's great.
So that's what I did. So even as adults, they need us to marvel at their work. But again, this is just part of, we give our kids so much. We breathe so much life into them
Yes.
when we are their biggest cheerleaders.
Yes. That's so important.
Yeah.
So important for them. And again, it takes some of that pressure off of us of I have to give everything and put it into my child. I have to be,
Right.
as a homeschool mom, I'm the educator. Okay, that means I am guiding and training in,
Mhm.
I am all source and all being of information.
Right.
Really just takes away from that to helping to facilitate what God's doing in our children's
Mhm.
lives. And that kind of
Mhm.
brings me to one of the questions I was directly wanted to ask you. As a mom with many children, how did you, in those busy, busy years when you had all your children at home, how did you get enough from the Lord to keep going every day when, there's just bad days that happen and,
Right.
different things that you yourself may have gone through of some fatigue with some
Mhm.
babies
Mhm.
or, things like that, moves. I know sometimes that can really bring a lot of uprooting to a family. How
Yeah.
did you get time with the Lord during those busy times?
Well, I will definitely say it, that time with God during that season doesn't look like it did before kids. And that's okay. It doesn't make it any less meaningful.
Yeah.
We're not any less obedient. I think faithfulness, just doing it every day, whether um, even if it's just a small amount of time.
Mm,
I had this one friend, and I'll never forget what she said. She personally made a vow to the Lord that she would never go to bed without having read something out of the Bible, even if it's just one
okay.
verse. I thought that was a really, so everybody kind of can have their own little their approach to it, but I think that it's nice if we can get it alone, if that's possible.
Sure.
I'm not a huge morning person. So that was, so that was a little difficult for me. But if you've got 15, 20 minutes and we can train our kids to get going on the things that they need to be doing while we spend that little bit of time with the Lord.
Mhm.
Also, it doesn't end. At that moment, we're hopefully throughout the day when we find ourselves
Mm.
folding laundry and no one's talking to us, it's a wonderful time to stop and just be talking to the Lord about maybe
Yes.
whatever you didn't get to cover in your prayer time or whatever has happened, between prayer time and folding clothes that was problematic, that you need to process
Right.
with them, the other thing is training our kids to sit quietly, especially when they're very little, in
Mm.
the same room with us, playing. And they know that that's our quiet time, and they need to be just keep themselves busy and keep the
Right.
noise level down. And it's good for them to see us in the word, to see us praying
Yes.
and that kind of thing. So
Yes.
it really is, it can look different in each season, but I think the important
Right.
thing is that we are doing it, and when we fall off the wagon, we get back on again. We don't give up because we've fallen off again. That would be exactly what the enemy wants. We get
Right.
back on and we're faithful, and God is really faithful to take the little and make it more than
Mhm.
enough. I remember
Mhm.
just reading until I got to a verse that I felt like just really stood out to me, and I would write it down on an index card and lay it someplace, like maybe next to my day planner that I referenced a lot throughout the day.
Mhm.
And I would see
Mhm.
that verse laying there, and it would just be a reminder of what the Lord told me. And many times as the day progressed, that verse was really applicable to that particular day.
Mm.
So, God is just faithful. He says in Isaiah 40:11 that he'll tend his flock like a shepherd. He'll carry the lambs in his arms, and he will gently lead
Mm.
those who are with young. God knows this can be challenging season for us. He's
Yes.
not being harsh. He is not being demanding, but he also knows that it's important for us to be with him in
Mhm.
order to, we need to be discipled by him as we're discipling our children. It's kind of this beautiful little symbiotic thing that I think goes on, where
Yes.
we say, Lord, I need you to shepherd me. And then as he
Right.
shepherds us, we see what it looks like to shepherd our children well. And
That's
so,
beautiful.
yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes another idea, audio Bible, sometimes that's
Yes.
really great, while
Right.
you're doing something else, you can listen to the Bible. And we have so many options now. It's quite amazing, but
It
yeah,
is.
but it is
I love that
important.
for,
Hmm.
sometimes too, that's the only way that my children can recognize, oh, mama's doing something. She's actively listening. And then they hear too. So I think that's kind of
Right.
a special thing that we have
Yeah.
available so readily right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Very
Absolutely.
good. Well, thank you so much for all of this. And I do want to, could you just share with our listeners about your podcast?
Sure. Yes. I have a podcast. It's called the Durenda Wilson Podcast. I know it's very creative, but it is on most podcast platforms,
Yeah,
Apple or iTunes, Spotify. You can also listen directly from my website, durendawilson.com. I have well over 400 episodes.
that's great.
And so there's so much content there. And like I said, I would encourage you to use the search bar if you need something specific.
Yeah.
There's probably going to be some episodes that come up. So I think you'll find lots and lots of encouragement there.
Well, I sure appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's just a wonderful time to be able to share and all the encouragement you've given for moms to be able to relax a bit and take a
Yes.
deep breath and
Yes,
go ahead and
enjoy those
educate and love those
kids.
children.
Yeah, this is
Yes,
such a precious time, and I know there are days that you're just like, this does not feel precious. But it is. And a little side note, whenever I felt like that consistently, something was usually awry, and it was usually because I hadn't been disciplining like I should. So, it's one of those things where, this is just God is so good at giving us red flags, and so
yeah,
that we can go back to
right.
enjoying our children.
Right. I'm going, okay, wait a minute. Let's get back to this. Usually it's my days,
Yes.
like if I've had a very, very busy day and been
Hmm.
out and about, and then the next day it's like, oh yes, I remember why I needed at home.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And it's okay to simplify on those days and
Yeah,
give yourself some grace. God is certainly wanting to pour out grace on us as moms as well. I really think He has a very special place in His heart for moms. So don't ever forget that.
oh, that's a blessing. Let's go ahead and close in prayer. Oh Lord, we're just grateful for this time with Durenda. We pray for your blessing on her ministry. She reaches out to so many moms across the world. We ask, Lord, that the moms that are listening will be strengthened, that their hearts will be encouraged to realize equipping and training and loving their children is something that is just beautiful in your sight, that you want to equip them to be able to do that. We just praise your name. Amen.
Amen.